Okay, I had to leave my phone, but I just want to put this all out so that there's no misinterpretation, because people will say that if you're not with this side, then you're with this side, and etc. And it's, I think that's what divides people, and I think a divided people who view each other in all these different ways is a great situation. If you want to have power over people, then the government can come in and say, look, see, you need the government to help protect you from each other, and everything's falling apart. When in reality, we're all capable of not having things fall apart and not viewing each other as in all these weird ways. But that's why I just want to clarify what I think. So, I want to be very clear. I just want to break down what I'm saying. I think that, here are my fears. I'm afraid of all these chess moves. I'm afraid of the chess moves, and I'm afraid of the really dark powers that seem like they want to gain more power. And if you say dark powers, oh, that sounds a little weird, right? It'd be easy for someone to say, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist. And which is another, think about the language. It's another form of like, oh, it's like, hey, is this true? It's like, no, that's a conspiracy theory. It's like, no one wants to touch a conspiracy theory. So all you have to do is say something that is a conspiracy theory, and people won't even want to talk about it or touch it, because no one wants to be ostracized. And that's something I've talked about before, but why people don't think for themselves, because we all work in groups, and you have a workspace, and it's a lot easier when everyone thinks fairly similarly. So if you have a view or you're questioning something, nobody wants to be labeled something that's going to make them not fit into the group. Your life can actually fall apart. I mean, people can get fired, etc. I'm sure some places, if you said you voted for Trump, or just as an example, you would get fired maybe, which is kind of scary. But what I'm saying is, I'm afraid of dark forces. Not dark forces, but in a way, dark people, like, you could watch a movie and you might say, ooh, that was dark. What does that mean? It's what I'm trying to say. People who have negative intentions. For instance, the communists, Stalin, who they would take over people's property, put people in concentration camps, have millions, tens of millions of people starve to death. Hitler, who would have all sorts of people in concentration camps, the Jews and anyone who didn't fit in. Millions of people die. That's dark. That's what I mean. That same type of thing. They're building quarantine camps. Now, if you're going to build a quarantine camp with the intentions of putting people who disobey you in it, are you going to say that up front? I mean, probably that wouldn't be the best move. It would probably be a lot better to say, no, we're not doing that. That's a conspiracy theory. It'd probably be a lot better of a strategic move to say that. Hey, are you going to put people in here, in these camps, that don't follow your rules? What do you think they're just going to say? Yeah, we are. You could look these things up. In Canada and New Zealand, they're building quarantine camps for people with COVID. Keep in mind that COVID is I believe it's real. I believe that if you're under 50, from what I've seen, it's completely overblown, and that's a whole other topic that I don't want to talk about. I think they're using that as a opportunity and an excuse to usher in all of these things that they've been waiting for. Just like a lot of the things in the Patriot Act that they pushed through after the attack on the World Trade Center. They had been trying to get those things through before 9/11. But once 9/11 happened, they had the excuse. They went into the Middle East, and we've been there ever since. I don't know what we really accomplished over there. Maybe some of it's valid, maybe some of it's not. But my only point of that was that they wanted to do that for a long time before they had the excuse to do it. And I think COVID is just a great excuse to lock down the economy. You could look up things like the Great Reset. The Great Reset Klaus Schwab, Klaus Schwab. He wrote a book. You could look at these things. The integration of the human with, like, you could say microchipping is, look in the description on Amazon under the book. He talks about the integration of human with technology. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's right in front of our faces. But we're all fighting. I mean, I'm not really fighting, but a lot of people are looking at, what they don't like and getting triggered, and the media can use emotional buttons. They just press an emotional button and then watch the results, and everyone attacks this person or everyone attacks that person. And must be kind of entertaining to be in a position of power, sitting back and watching your whole theater play out, just as you are hoping for, or just as you, and you're controlling the strings basically, because if you take this picture of people in the Capitol, these people are going to do this, and then that's perfect because then you can block Trump, and then it's like a giant chess game. This is what I think. But back to what I'm saying about what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that they're going to find a way to make vaccinations mandatory or next to mandatory. Like, you can't get a driver's license without a vaccination. You can't leave the state. Make it harder and harder and harder to the point that they're basically mandatory. I'm afraid of them taking away guns. Hitler's police would not have been able to round up all of the Jews if they had semi-automatic rifles on the other side of the door. Biden is totally against semi-automatic rifles. You can look it up. Assault weapons ban, mandatory gun buybacks. They're already trying to make body armor illegal in New York. They're doing all these chess moves that is going to set the stage so that all of a sudden you don't take a vaccine and you're in a camp, and it's like, wait, how did this happen? And it's all happening right now. That's what I'm afraid of, and nobody's seeing it. And I'm afraid they're going to try to take people's guns. To think that this couldn't happen is interesting, because this all happened in the 19th century, 1930s, 20s, 30s, 40s. That was like 80 years ago. To think that human nature has changed completely and it could never happen again, I think is naive. And to think that that's a conspiracy theory, to say that it could happen again, I think is naive too. And I'm hoping that none of this does happen, but I see too many things. It's like if a guy is gonna, do something bad to you, and he looks around, closes the door behind him, starts to put on gloves, takes a gun out. It's like, okay, at some point you're gonna say, hey, wait a minute, something's up. And they're already doing this in China with social credit scores, and I'm afraid that they're gonna create. So I'm afraid of mandatory vaccinations. I'm afraid of the mandatory gun buybacks to disarm the people. I'm afraid of the tracking and the tracing. I'm afraid of them censoring anyone who speaks out about what's going on, or about maybe as situations arise where someone was mistreated or something. I'm afraid of those people being censored. The censorship, I think they were testing it, and now it's almost full blown. I mean, they're censoring people. First it started with doctors, now it's spreading to the president, and people are like, well, I don't like Trump, so that's fine with me. Okay, great. I would never want to censor someone I didn't like, and in my opinion, it has nothing to do with Trump. It's about, they're censoring a lot of people who made videos just about economics and basically things you could call conservative videos. I would say I'm a libertarian, not a conservative, but at the moment, I mean, yeah, that's what I would say. But I would say I do resonate with more of what conservatives say in general. But I wouldn't want to classify myself as that. I would want to classify myself, if I had to, as a libertarian. Freedom for everybody, basically. Which means even if I disagree with you, I wouldn't want to censor your stuff from Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. And to see so many people saying, yeah, I'm cool with that, that's scary to me, because they're cool with it until it happens to them, And or someone on their side, etc. And the idea of being cool with something negative happening or someone's rights being infringed upon that you don't agree with just because you don't agree with them, I don't think that's a strong thing or character trait. And I'm afraid of, back to what I'm afraid of mandatory vaccinations. I'm afraid of them taking away the guns. I'm afraid of, because that would set the stage for a defenseless people. I'm afraid of the censorship. I'm afraid of potentially digital certificates, as Bill Gates said. You could look these things up, digital certificates. The first page, the problem is the first page. Google and Facebook and everyone, the first page is going to be conspiracy theory articles debunking what I'm saying, but not actually providing any substance against it, so that it's very hard to find the original things. But he spoke about digital certificates. I think this was on a Reddit response. Somebody asked him, well, eventually we would need digital certificates. Then what happens is they'll say, hey, bury this. I really don't know how it happens, but I know that when you type it in, you'll probably get like the first page on Google will be conspiracy theory debunking fact checkers. And it's interesting because it's not that hard to hire a company, hire a team and say, hey, start this website, call yourself a fact checker, make up some name, and say what's true and what's false, and have everything, and I'll tell you what's true. You know, it's like, is it so hard to believe that Hitler would have done that, or Stalin would have done that? I mean, if you go to Russia, or if you went to Russia, especially during like heavy communist times, like more heavy than now, you think you could type something in? Imagine if they had Google. You think it's far-fetched to say that they would control what you're able to see? This is like classic ways of manipulation. And it's like, now we've been convinced to think that that's a conspiracy theory, which is probably, if you want to take power, that'd be a great thing to have, to be able to convince someone that things are conspiracy theories, because then no one questions them, and then you can do what you want, basically. I mean, that would be great. Imagine if you could go to trial for murder or something, or that's not what I'm saying. That would be great. But imagine if you're a lawyer, and all you had to do is say, well, everyone knows that it's a conspiracy theory that my client committed this, and everyone's like, oh, well, not guilty, verdict's in. And that's like kind of what happens now. It's like, if you say it's a conspiracy theory, it's like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, and it's done. Do you wonder why there's so many new conspiracy theories? Probably because a lot of them are true. I mean, I'm getting vague now. I'm getting vague. Back to what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of the mandatory vaccinations. I'm afraid of taking guns. I'm afraid of censorship. I'm afraid of digital certificates. And I'm very afraid of a digital currency. They're crashing the dollar right now. I think we're going to switch to a digital currency, and I'm afraid that you will have a social credit score linked to your digital currency account, where if you do something they don't like, they say, Colin, we regret to inform you that you're now unable to spend or receive your money, whatever they call it, whatever the new currency is called, until you present yourself at the police station for etc. Now you have control of people's lives. If somebody, and then facial recognition, etc. Your phone is already, the new software updates to Instagram. You know, they could like watch you while you are just doing anything. It's all scary. I mean, does that scare you? Does that scare anyone? It's almost too much information for most people, because if you thought about what I'm saying, you wouldn't be able to fit in with the communities that sustain you, like your work community, your friend circles, because a lot of people have, you know, public opinions, and if you said something outside of that, they'd be like, dude, I don't know about him, etc. So people don't want to fall into that group where other people look at you like as an outsider, because your livelihood depends on it. But in a lot of situations. But I would just say I would hope that everyone pays very close attention to what's going on, and hopefully, if I were wrong about everything, I would be so happy. But I don't think I am. I really hope that I end up being wrong. But pay attention to our freedoms, to our rights. Do they come back? I mean, I remember the lockdown was going to be 2 weeks. And then I understand that the hospitals are packed in some areas. I believe COVID is real. I'm not like, I don't think that's real. I do think it's real. But I haven't seen much evidence that lockdowns work. Like, okay, we'll lock down the entire economy. I mean, what if they just, I was saying this plan, what if I find it hard to believe that people in charge who had our best interests in mind would cut off the ability of people to work. Imagine if you said, okay, under 50 years old, for healthy people, like 99.8% chance or higher, you're gonna survive. All of those people, you can go back to work. Everyone older than that, 60 or older, we highly recommend you don't work. We highly recommend you stay out of certain areas. Maybe certain businesses, certain grocery stores can say, hey, I'm sorry, we don't want to take the liability, etc. Something like that. Everyone who's older or at risk can get some sort of government stipend or government, assistance paid for from taxes from everyone who's still allowed to work. Everyone else is, if they get sick, they say, hey, could you please take 2 weeks off, etc. Then everything goes back to normal. Everyone is educated about the actual risks, and if you want to work from home, maybe businesses, you say that businesses, they get government funds paid for with tax dollars from people who are working to allow workers who would prefer to work from home to work from home. And that's how I would do it. I mean, what if they set up, I don't see any Cirque du Soleil can set up tents in like 5 days, like massive tents. I don't see any like temporary treatment centers for COVID patients, and all the nurses and doctors, etc., who got COVID could just help people in these temporary centers who had COVID, so that everyone in the entire place had COVID. Keep in mind that for most people, COVID is like the flu. I think it's totally overblown. I understand that for some people it can be very serious, and I'm not downplaying that. I'm just saying for most people it's not. And to lock down, to change the entire world and have a great reset and a great new world, and I think it's all a giant farce, and I think it's scary that people are buying it. And I think we're walking right into an authoritarian government. This time it's going to be a lot scarier, I think, than the communists in Russia or the Nazis in Germany, because of the level of technology and the integration of technology into our lives, and how much more you can control people when you have control of that technology and that information. And I think the stage is set, and I just want to be clear about that, what I think, and I hope that we all stay vigilant, and I hope that just by being aware and not complying with things that infringe on our rights, I'm hoping that we will not be taken advantage of, and that we could go back to being free people just by being aware of the possibilities that people are trying to take advantage of us. So much love to everyone, and I don't say any of this out of hatred, and I want to, I say it out of love, and I want to live in love, but that doesn't mean that you just lay down and let people hurt you. So that's it.